My name is Amara Osei. I am 34 years old. I work as a pediatric nurse in Atlanta, Georgia, and I live alone in a two-bedroom apartment with a small balcony where I grow tomatoes in the summer because nobody taught me how, and I had to figure it out myself. That detail matters more than it sounds. I have been figuring things out by myself for a very long time. My parents, Leonard and Patricia Osei, were not bad people in the way that makes a clean story. They did not drink. They did not hit. They went to church every Sunday and brought food to neighbors when someone was sick and smiled at everyone on the street with the kind of warmth that made people say what wonderful parents you must have. And maybe to the outside world they were, but to me they were simply absent. Not physically. They were in the house. They were at the dinner table. They were there in body and completely somewhere else in every way that mattered. My brother Kofi was the center of everything, not because he was cruel about it. He was actually kind, still is, but he was the firstborn son, and in my family that carried a weight that quietly crushed everything else around it. His football games were circled on the calendar. His report cards went on the refrigerator. When he got a part in the school play, my mother took 3 days off work to help him rehearse. I do not say this with bitterness toward Kofi. I say it because it is the truth of what my childhood was. I was the second child, the daughter, the one who managed. I made my own lunch from the age of 8. I learned to iron my own uniform at 10. By 12, I was reminding my mother about parent-teacher conferences she still did not attend. My teachers knew my face and not my parents' names. One of them, a woman named Mrs. Addo, who taught me English in 7th grade, once kept me after class and asked quietly if everything was okay at home. I told her yes. I had already learned by then that the honest answer created problems I did not know how to handle. The first important day they missed was my 8th grade graduation. It was a small ceremony, just the middle school, nothing grand, but they had promised. My father had said specifically, "We will be there, Amara, do not worry." I sat in the 3rd row in a white dress my aunt had ironed for me, and I watched every other family file in. My parents did not come. Kofi's regional football qualifier had been moved to the same day, and that was that. My aunt came and held my hand during the ceremony and took a photo afterward that I still have somewhere in a box. In the photo I am smiling. I had already learned how to do that too. I stopped expecting them after that. Not dramatically, not with a conversation or a confrontation. I just quietly adjusted the version of myself that looked toward the door waiting for them to walk in. I became very good at not waiting. I graduated high school with honors. They came to that one, stood for the photo, left before the reception because Kofi had a dinner with his university coach. I told myself it was fine. I had trained myself to believe it. I got into nursing school on a partial scholarship. I called home to share the news. My mother said, "That is good, we are proud of you," and then asked me to remind my father about Kofi's registration deadline. I sat with my phone in my hand after she hung up and looked at the wall of my dorm room for a while. Then I went to the library and studied for 4 hours because that was the only thing that felt solid. 4 years of nursing school. They visited once. Kofi's university was 3 hours away, and they drove there 6 times a year. When I graduated with my nursing degree, I walked across that stage in front of 400 people and scanned the crowd the way you do when you still have some hope left. My mother had called 2 days before to say they were coming. There had been a change of plans. Kofi was signing a contract with a local sports organization, and they needed to be there for photographs and a celebratory lunch. She said, "We will celebrate with you next weekend." Next weekend came and went without a mention of it. My aunt came again. She sat in the front section and made more noise than 10 people when my name was called. I love her for that. I always will. My wedding was 4 years later. I married a man named David, a quiet, careful man who was a secondary school teacher and made me laugh in a way I had not known I needed. We planned a small ceremony, 60 people, a garden venue, afternoon light. I called my mother 8 months in advance. I gave them the date, the time, the address. I followed up twice. My mother assured me both times that nothing would stop them from being there. 3 days before the wedding, my father called. His voice carried that particular tone I had learned over 30 years, the one that meant something was coming that I would not like but was expected to accept graciously. Kofi had been offered a last-minute invitation to a sports event in another city, something important for his career, and they felt they needed to go with him for support. He said they would watch the video afterward. He said weddings were about the couple anyway, not the guests. He said I would understand. I did not cry. I had spent a long time building the part of myself that did not cry at things like this. I said, "Okay, Dad, I understand," and I hung up and stood in my kitchen and looked at the tomatoes on my windowsill, the ones I had grown from seeds by following instructions on a gardening website because no one in my family had ever taught me anything about growing things. David held me that night without asking questions. He already understood. He had watched them for years by then. The wedding was beautiful. My aunt walked me down the aisle. She wore a deep green dress and cried from the moment she saw me and did not stop until after the cake was cut. David cried during his vows. I let myself cry too, which felt like something I had earned. My parents sent a card that arrived 4 days after the wedding. It had a generic printed message inside and their 2 signatures. No note, no phone call on the day, nothing. When I had my daughter, Naomi, 18 months later, I was alone in the hospital for 11 hours before David was able to leave work and get there. I had called my mother that morning when the contractions started. She said she would come. She did not come. She called 2 days later to say she had not been feeling well and asked me to send photos. I sent 3 pictures and did not call again for 2 weeks. Naomi is now 3 years old. She has met my parents 4 times. I did not make a decision about my parents in any single dramatic moment. It was a slow and quiet process, the way a tide goes out. I stopped calling as frequently. Then I stopped calling first at all. Then I stopped answering on the days when it felt like too much to perform okayness for people who had never really asked how I was. By last year, we spoke perhaps once a month, brief and surface level, more out of habit than connection. My aunt kept me informed about the family. That was how I learned, 6 months ago, that my father had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition requiring surgery, and that my mother's health had also been declining, her joints making it difficult to manage the house. Kofi was living abroad by then, building his life, calling on weekends. The people who had structured their entire world around him were now managing on their own. My aunt called me on a Thursday evening. She did not pressure me. She simply told me what was happening and said I should know, and then she was quiet, which is the most respectful thing anyone has ever done for me in a hard moment. I sat with it for a week. I talked to David. I talked to a therapist I had been seeing for 2 years, a careful woman who never told me what to do, but had a way of asking questions that helped me find what I actually thought underneath all the layers of what I was supposed to think. What I found, when I was honest, was not rage. I had expected rage. What I found was something much quieter and much sadder. It was grief. Grief for the graduations and the wedding morning and the hospital room and every ordinary Tuesday when I had needed a parent and there had been no one there. It was grief that had nowhere to go because the people it was meant for had never understood what they had taken. I did not go. That is the part of this story that people find hard to hear. I did not rush to their side. I did not perform the reunion that would have made everyone comfortable. My father had his surgery. Kofi flew back for 2 weeks. My mother managed with help from neighbors and a cousin who lived nearby. I sent a card. I wrote in it that I hoped the surgery went well and that I was thinking of them. I meant both of those things. I also meant the distance. I have learned, slowly and at great cost to myself, that I am allowed to mean both things at once. My mother called me the week after the surgery. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. She said, "Your father is recovering well." She said, "Kofi has gone back now." She said, "It is quiet here." And then she said something she had never said to me in 34 years. She said, "I know we were not always there for you the way we should have been." I held the phone and looked out at my balcony and the tomato plants I had grown myself, and I thought about the white dress in 8th grade and the empty seats at my nursing graduation and the card that arrived 4 days after my wedding. I said, "Thank you for saying that, Mom." She asked if I would visit. I said I would think about it, not as a punishment, as the truth, because I genuinely did not know yet, and I had made a commitment to myself to stop saying things I did not mean to people who had spent years doing exactly that to me. I am still thinking about it. Some days I am closer to yes. Some days I sit on my balcony with Naomi in my lap, pointing at the tomatoes, and I think about what it means to tend something carefully, to show up for it consistently, to give it what it needs even when it is inconvenient. And I think that is the only definition of love I have ever trusted. My parents missed every important day of my life. Not out of cruelty, out of a habit of looking elsewhere that became so natural they stopped noticing the cost. I missed the day they needed me most. Not out of cruelty either, out of a truth I had finally stopped apologizing for. Some things cannot be fixed. Some things can only be understood, quietly, on a balcony, in the afternoon light, with a child in your arms who will never once wonder if you are coming. I made sure of that.